Are the ideas of white fragility and white privilege useful in understanding and addressing racism? And why or why not? So, Coleman, do you want to start that off?
Sure. I don't think I'm not sure I could be friends with someone who actually took white fragility as a recipe for how to live. Luckily, I don't know anyone like that. But what she says in the book is essentially for if say you and I are having a conversation, you're white, I'm black. There are totally normal human conversational moves and feelings that you're not supposed to avail yourself of, or else you fall into the sin of committing, white fragility. You can't remain silent. You can't argue back. This is if we're talking about race. You can't express your opinion. You can't express your disagreement, no matter how understanding. The mere fact that I'm black and you're white means you have to accept what I'm saying. You have to admit that you're racist as a starting point. And anything less than that admission is just, on this view, by definition, denialism. So it's a very again, like I have intimate friendships with white people, and I don't think any of them could operate under such a rubric. It's a very strange way to show you respect me as a black person, to say you'll never disagree with anything I say. In fact, what you're treating me like implicitly is like, I don't know, a petulant child who can't be pushed back against because my feelings, because I'm so unreachable by reason that you have to be the adult in the room, and I have to be the child. So that I don't see how that points a path forward at all.
I suppose you could say that there's some value in asking people to put themselves in the other person's shoes. So if you're an organization that's mostly white and there are relatively few people of color in it, it's not unreasonable to ask, if you're a white person in that organization, that you imagine yourself to be this other guy. Imagine yourself to be the odd person out, the only woman on the team, or the only black in the department, or something like that. How do you think it feels? How do you think it feels if people look at you and they impute to you certain views or expectations or whatever, just based upon the fact of the way you look? How do you think it feels to be, in that position? And if that's what people have in mind when they talk about privilege, be aware of the fact that whiteness actually matters in certain circumstances, and that people who are not white in those circumstances may have to bear certain burdens or meet certain challenges. I mean, I can go that far. Of course, you could also ask the person to imagine what it's like to be the white person in that circumstance. For example, to imagine being a cop confronted with a recalcitrant citizen who might be dangerous and armed, and you're white, and you have to deal with that situation, and you might be afraid, and you might do whatever you do. I could ask a person to imagine and put themselves in that. So in that situation, so in a way, that's just a kind of human empathy, and you can ask it of people depending on the circumstance, whether they be white or non-white. And so far, I'm willing to go. But I think there's something really important in what Coleman just said, which is that often this emphasis on, white silence equals violence. This idea of check your privilege presumes a certain kind of black fragility. It's kind of predicated upon the idea that black people have to be treated with kid gloves in all situations. Otherwise, offense is given to them. Discomfort is imposed upon them, they are made not to feel welcome. What's the new term of art? Inclusion and belonging. Inclusion and belonging. We have to make sure that people feel that they belong. And this infantilization of Black people on the supposition that the least off word said, the smallest gesture might be, somehow threatening to their very sense of well-being, is, I think, what's at the root of a lot of this emphasis on white privilege and so on.
Joining us now is DePaul University professor Dr. Jason Hill. He's also the author of We Have Overcome. Jason, thank you so much for being here with me today. You have a lot going on. Today, a faculty council voted on a resolution condemning a recent article that you wrote in support of Israel. If you could give us the backstory on what's going on. I read over this article. I didn't really see anything too controversial. It is your opinion, and you are entitled to an opinion.
That's right. I wrote an article that was published last week in the Federalist defending Israel's right to defend its borders, to annex the West Bank, which it has legal right to do after fighting a 1967 defensive war against Jordan. And I made the point that Prime Minister Netanyahu had every right to annex the West Bank because it fought a defensive war, and that the people there are properly the responsibility of the Jordanian government, and that Israel had basically fought an altruistic war in which it had taken the people called the Palestinian people, taken them as their responsibility. The second point I made in the article, which was quite controversial, was that the constitution of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority called for the obliteration of Jewry and Israel, and that Israel has every right to regard the people, many of the Palestinians there, as national security threats, and that Israel is the only beacon of light in a very primitive and dark part of the world. When you look at those illiberal Arab states that do not respect the inalienability of human rights, that Israel stands for religious reciprocity, individual rights, capitalism, the free market system. And I basically stated that quite clearly, and then sort of all hell broke loose, and I was attacked for my views as being Islamophobic, anti-Muslim, a xenophobic racist. There were various protests on campus demanding that the president force me to attend a racial sensitivity workshop, to have me censured, and to have me issue an apology, which I steadfastly refused to do. Subsequently, the president issued a statement saying that while my views did not express the views of the university, the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution, and the university's own defense of academic freedom, upheld my right to speak in my name. Subsequently, faculty council has taken it upon itself to side with the students and to pass a resolution, which, if passed, would, make no mistake about it, be a censure against me, would cast my views as hateful, hurtful, harmful to students. And they have made no mistake about siding with these student organizations. There are about 6 of them.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and I want to get to a few of these things. But number one, did you ever imagine this sort of reaction to your article?
In one sense, I did not. In another sense, given the anti-Semitism that is rampant on U.S. campuses, given the vehemence with which the far left is now committed to shutting down free speech on college campuses, given the anti-Israeli sentiments on campuses, in retrospect, I'm not surprised.
And another thing, just a little bit about your background. I mean, you're an immigrant. I mean, your story is very interesting. And I see you as a very open-minded person and somebody that likes to engage in dialogue. And so I know that you wouldn't have this type of reaction to other speakers or other people that come on campus that say things that you don't agree with, right?
No, absolutely not. I'm a First Amendment absolutist. And so long as your speech is not an incitement to violence, I am committed, whether you are a far left Marxist, whether you are a communist, whether you are an advocate as I am of capitalism, the free market system, individual rights, I uphold your right in the marketplace of ideas to respectfully, in a climate of respect, to produce your ideas, to have them be contested with rejoinders and with rational debate by speakers, interlocutors who can politely contest your ideas. I have been known to be an advocate of free speech and have never, ever advocated the view that offensiveness is a criterion for shutting down free speech. After all, free speech, we uphold free speech not for speech that we like, but for speech that we actually dislike, because the principle that secures your right to free speech is the same principle that secures the right for the speech of your adversary.
Yeah, and again, the free speech crisis on college campuses can't be ignored. And I know that you have been speaking out about this for quite some time publicly, which is probably what has outraged some people. I mean, I'm sure they've been keeping an eye on anything that you say or do. But what does it say about the climate on college campuses?
What does it say about our climate? You know, in my book, We Have Overcome, I made 2 points that I've never been forgiven for. I talked about the exceptionalism of this great republic of ours, the United States of America, as the most exceptional country on the face of the earth, and the American people as an exceptional people. And I also extol the virtues of Jewish civilization and of Israel as a non-apartheid, non-genocidal state, which it was being accused of, and it's still being accused of on college campuses. And so this kind of animus and vitriol against me has been brewing since the publication of that book, We Have Overcome. And I think the article that was published was just an excuse for them really for the mob to really attack me. It gave them a real excuse. But I have been, an advocate of Americanism, of the state of Israel. I make no mistake about it. I think Israel is our alter ego in the Middle East. It practices religious reciprocity. It's a democracy. And people just cannot get used to the fact that a conservative, independent professor in the humanities, it's like, how dare he exist among a bunch of far left Marxists? I call them Bolshevik welfare scholars, some of them, really, who are indoctrinating our students into anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. And because I have spoken out repeatedly and I've written articles on this phenomenon that's going on in our campuses, I think I've been singled out for attack.
Do you worry about your employment with the university? I know that these students want you to take sensitivity training. Are you worried about your employment and the label that could come of this?
Well, I'm a full tenured professor, and so for me to be fired over something like this would be quite egregious. A friend of mine said to me recently, they have dragged you through the mud, they have slandered you, they have harassed you, they have damaged your reputation. So the slander, the libelous claims that have been made against me, according to this friend, and I think I would concur with the agreement, has already occurred. But respectability is something that, you have to sort of put a check mark on when you are standing up for your convictions and you're standing up for your principles and your ideas. And I will not apologize. I did nothing wrong. I advocated my views in my own name in a non-scholarly opinion piece, standing up for Israel, standing up for the right of Israel to defend itself against terrorists. People forget the onslaught of terrorist actions that Israel faced in the 2000s, in the early part of the 21st century, in the 1990s, in the 1980s, and I make no apologies for that.
And the students who are outraged, what would your direct message be to them if you were sitting in a room with them right now?
I would say you have a democratic right to be offended. That part of what an education does and part of what debate accomplishes is to challenge received wisdom. That education and the contestation of ideas in and of itself is offensive. You're all adults, you're all grown-ups, you're not children. Stop whining. If you disagree with my ideas, politely write a rejoinder. This is a free country. You can blog, you can write in any magazine, you can contest my ideas, But to sort of form a lynch mob against me and demand that I be removed from the university, to create flyers with pictures of me, accusing me of a purveyor of hate speech, a racist, an Islamophobe, an advocate of genocide, which is what they have said I am advocating, is both, these things are all childish and infantile. And I would say to them, take the lessons that you ought to be learning in your classroom, which is critical reasoning, and debate me politely on issues in the Middle East.